Loneliness is as bad for your physical health as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
That's wild.
Neurodegenerative disorders like dementia or Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, increased odds of getting one of those things just from being lonely. There just isn't an easy button. And if there was one, you shouldn't press it because it's not actually going to make your life easier. Your relationship with yourself will always be the direct indicator of how good your relationship is with other people. So if you have really, really low self-esteem, if you have low self-worth, then you're probably not going to be as great of a parent because you're probably going to be searching for ways for your kids or for your wife to make you feel more worthy, to make you have more self-esteem. And the bottom line is they're not going to be able to help do that. That's a you problem, not a them problem. But the last thing I would want is for my kids to grow up knowing their dad is somebody who couldn't control his own temper.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
What's going on? Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting, the show where we focus on helping dads become better family leaders. I am your host, Vidal. And on this episode today, we're going to have a conversation around how building the right relationships can elevate your leadership at home and in business. My guest today is a man who's gone from knocking on doors to knocking down barriers in the world of podcasting, networking, entrepreneurship. He's interviewed some of the world-class leaders, celebrities, high achievers. He's built a tech company from scratch. And most importantly, he's leading at home as a husband and father. I want to welcome to the show, Travis Chappell. What's going on, brother?
Gee, what's up, dude? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Dude, so I wanted to start the conversation off, man. And I think you'll enjoy this story a little bit because it resonates with some of the stuff that you talk about.
Yeah.
And so I was 16 years old, man, and I'm getting ready, growing up in church as well. I'm getting ready to prepare my first sermon for a youth service, right? And I hit up one of my mentors at the time. I call him Pops. And I'm like, hey man, can you help me prepare this sermon? Right? I've never done it before. I want to knock it out the park. He's sitting with me, showing me the passage, and he's kind of giving me the angle of which way to approach the talk and all that, right? Kind of pulling things out. And he asked me this question that I was totally unprepared to answer. He goes, where is life at? He's like, where is life at? What's the point of this whole thing? Like our existence, our not necessarily what's the meaning of life, but like, what's the point of us being here and having consciousness and doing all that? As a 16-year-old kid, I'm like, I don't know how to answer that, man. I don't know what you want from me. And so he goes, how did you get that shirt that you're wearing? And I'm like, well, I bought it at the store. And where'd you get the money to buy that shirt that you're wearing? Well, I got it from my mom, right? And where'd your mom get the money to buy that, to give you the money for you so you could buy that shirt? And I'm like, well, from her job. And then he's like, and where did the store get that shirt from? From the manufacturer. Where'd the manufacturer get? So he starts pulling back all these layers, right? And he's like, look, man, independence is sort of an illusion. We're interdependent on each other, right? And if we're interdependent on each other in this world, then relationships really matter. And they're very, very important. And it's important for you to get good at knowing how to establish good relationships and develop good relationships. And at 16, man, I didn't know how to process that. And now as I've gotten older and gotten through my life experience and personal development and all that, now it's making sense. It's making a whole lot of sense. And my question for you is, man, when did that revelation happen for you? When you discovered like the importance of relationships and networking and having the right kind of people in your circle?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I love the story and I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
When it happened for me was probably early 20s when I was kind of coming out of the world that I grew up in and leaving that world for the first time. Very strict fundamentalist Baptist background, cult-like behavior that I would classify it as. Because when I left, I was basically leaving everything behind. I was starting from scratch. So when I started my show, my podcast back in 2017, I called it Build Your Network. And it wasn't because I was an expert networker. It was because I wanted to learn how to network. It was because I was starting from scratch with my own network because I didn't have anybody that I could rely on, talk to, ask advice from. Like I didn't have somebody who could get me a job or like do anything that would benefit my life. Yeah. And I kind of realized at that time, it was what made the most sense to me because it was always the best way that I learned was by getting around people who were just so much better at that, whatever that thing was. Yeah. I learned directly from those people. And I learned quickly that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, that people were already doing the thing that they were already good at. And so when I looked at at that point, I had some early success for like what a 22, 23-year-old would have, especially with no college degree. Well, I mean, I had a college degree. It was an unaccredited Bible degree, which is basically the same as not having a degree. Yeah. In terms of its ability to like get you a job, you know?
Yeah.
So I was doing door-to-door sales at the time, and I was making six figures as a door-to-door sales, like 100% commission door-to-door sales guy in, you know, at 22, 23. And so I felt like, you know, I'm doing well here. I'm making it.
Yeah.
And the network piece really kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, because I realized that like the only reason that I felt like I had done six figures the year before doing door-to-door was that I got in with a guy who had done much more than that going door to door. And he gave me his exact scripts, his exact objection overcomers, his exact schedule, like showed me exactly what to do, exactly what to say. And all I did was my best impression of him. It was like, I did not have to go in and reinvent the wheel. I didn't have to go think about my own process. I didn't have to go build or create anything new. All I did was just mirror exactly what he told me to do. And I realized like, man, if I were just like given a binder and said, go knock on some doors, I probably wouldn't have kept going, because I would have had to figure out all of this stuff on my own. And I'd rather just learn it from somebody who's already been there, done that, bought the t-shirt twice. And so I started like thinking about that and ways to apply in other areas of my life. And I started realizing it was kind of a pattern. And I'll give you kind of a simple example of that. My dad and I used to play a bunch of ping pong growing up. And he was a big, loved ping pong. And so my mom got him a table, and me and him ended up setting up the whole thing together. It might have been like a Christmas gift or something. I want to say I was like junior high at the time, probably like 13 something.
Okay.
And I started playing ping pong with my dad. But I would lose so bad every time because he was so much better at ping pong than I was. But I was also really competitive. So I started playing a lot of ping pong. I'd be practicing in the garage, you know, like you flip one side of the table up and like practice hitting, you know, the ball over the net. Yeah, right. And then my dad would come home and we'd play a couple of games, and what happened was in that first like year and a half of having the table and playing my dad, I got astronomically better at ping pong, because I was playing with somebody that was so far past my skill set. And there's something to like the initial learning curve. Like when you're first starting something, you're going to learn more in terms of volume about that thing in the first 6 months of doing that thing, because you go from knowing nothing to knowing 80% of what there is to know. The additional 20% is how you have like the experts and the pros and people like that. But like most people can learn a lot of what there is to know about a new topic if you just like get into that topic. And that exponential growth is the most at the beginning, because you're going from 0 to, you know, level 3. And it's like, well, that's a massive jump. Whereas going from level 3 to level 4 isn't as massive a jump. So I know that there's something that there's something to be considered there. But I realized that my dad and I kept playing throughout high school. Like when I was, you know, when I was like 15, that's when I started, I would win one every once in a while. It was like, okay, I won, and he didn't let me win. It's because I got better. And then, you know, fast forward another few months and we're about the same skill level. And to this day, like if me and him played, it's probably just dependent on whoever's having a better game that's going to win. If we played 10 games, it'd probably be like four that one of us wins, and 6, or it might be 5 and 5. Like, I don't know. It's very close still. But for a while we still kept playing when I was at that skill level. But neither one of us ever got exponentially better than we were at that time, because we didn't go find somebody who was way better than we were to play with. We were only playing with each other. So we could only get like little bits and pieces better every time, because it'd be like, oh, try that serve. Oh, you try that serve. Okay, well, that works a little bit differently. But if you have somebody else, if we would have whatever, hired a professional ping pong player to come in and teach us more at that point, both of us would have gotten exponentially better by working with that person. And so it just made logical sense to me, man, that like, if you go get around people who are doing the things that you want to be doing at a really, really high level, you can't help but jump in skill level. It's so much more effective than just like reading a book about it or doing something like, if you go get around, whether it's high volume sales or it's ping pong or it's coaching or it's, you know, building a brick and mortar business, whatever it is, if you go find somebody who is so much better at that thing than you, then you're going to learn at a much faster rate. It's like your learning is going to be so far more accelerated than it would be by doing any other form of learning. And if it doesn't, you're not gonna be able to hang out with those people very long.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't continue to play with a professional ping pong player and not get better, because that person's just going to get bored playing you. You know what I mean? Like you got to surprise them and be like, oh man, like that was a good hit. Like you actually scored a real point on that one. Great job. Let's keep playing. It starts becoming more fun for them to teach you. So like if you don't level up, you will be forced out. So like you're forced to do one of two things. You're forced to level up, or you're forced to go do something different because you realize you don't really like doing that thing. Yeah. So networking, relationship building to me, just like it seemed like the unlock to be able to get to whatever I wanted to be doing, was to go get around somebody who's doing it at such a crazy level that I couldn't even comprehend, because like they just eat, breathe, and sleep the mistakes that I'm making, the little things that I don't realize that I'm doing wrong. They could point it out in half a second. You know what I mean? So it just, I don't know how else to say it except for that it just made sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, man. It's definitely a cheat code, because anytime that, at least I look at my personal growth as well, and anytime I've gone around people that are just further ahead in whatever my interest lies and all that, like I mean, by osmosis, right? You get around them and it influences you. You pick things up, you understand. Even like my pops, my mentor who I mentioned, Pops, the way he would speak and communicate when I would just be in rooms with him. Growing up as a kid from the hood, I would just hear how he communicated with different people.
Yep.
And he always told me, like, dude, you got to be kind of like a cultural chameleon, is the way he would say, is like, learn how to adapt, learn, you know, when you're in a room, assess who you're with and figure out how you can best communicate with them, and, you know, be curious about your community. Like, he just gave me game on that stuff. Right. And and it's played so much a part in podcasting and doing all these things, man. So,
well, it's timeless principles, man. Like Paul said that in the New Testament.
Yeah.
He said something along the lines of, I am all things to all men so that I might by some means win some, or something like that. It's like he understood that like you have to adjust the way that you communicate with different people, and you have to learn how to communicate with people from all walks of life, different cultural backgrounds, perspectives. If you have any desire to lead, or if you have any desire to persuade at a high level, you have to learn how to communicate with a bunch of different people. And so getting around somebody like your pops who knew how to do that, like you said, you're going to learn just by being around those people and soaking it up. The level of conversations that they have, the things that they're talking about, the questions that they ask each other, just everything changes. Even like the little things, like how they tip the waitress at the restaurant. Yeah. How they communicate to the server at the restaurant. Like things like that are, you can tell the difference from people who operate at that high of a level in every aspect of their life. And you, like I said, you'll be forced to do one of two things. You're forced to level up, or you're forced to get out, because you can't just be there and be a suck on all of those people, because they don't allow people like that in their lives.
So how did the podcasting provide you those opportunities to get into, you know, with these people that you can leverage their expertise depending on what your interest was at the time?
The podcast to me was the unlock, man. I didn't know that it was going to be this way at the time. I realized it probably like 2 to 3 years in, because I was building a podcast called Build Your Network. It was all about networking relationships. So inevitably, when I would go on other people's podcasts, that would be the thing that they talked to me about, because it was the topic of conversation that I had the most on the show. Yeah. And so I started getting people being like, well, what's your number one networking tip? What's your number one relationship building tip, or whatever? Yeah. And at first I would just go into what I had learned already, which is a lot of times what happens in content creation is like, at first you're probably just regurgitating all the same information that you've heard from a bunch of different people, which is nothing wrong with that. It's how everybody starts. And frankly, it's how the best creators continue to operate. You know, that even in, I think it was Ecclesiastes or a Song of Solomon, it says there's nothing new under the sun. And it's like, that's the truth, man. Like that, you're not going to come up with anything brand new, but you can come up with something that's a little bit different, unique based on what your experience is. Yeah. But at the time I didn't. I was just like, what's your number networking tip? I don't know. Master the value add. Give more than you take. Think long term instead of thinking short term. You know, things like that, I would say. And then I realized, like after a couple of years, that I was really not telling the truth in those scenarios, because the number one thing that I did for my network was having the podcast, having a reason to be able to connect with people that I wanted to learn from. That was the unlock for me. And when I started looking at the people that I had actually connected with, the people I had real relationships with, almost all of them branched off of having the podcast in some regard. So the podcast was like, eventually started becoming the answer that I would give to people. It's like, you want to explode your network? You want to level up the people that you're having conversations with? Start a podcast. Like that started becoming like my practical, piece of advice to everybody who was curious about how I was doing it.
Yeah, that was like your tagline. And still to this day, man, I mean, that's like when I think about I think about you because you advocate for it. So, and not only because you have a business and everything built around it, but you advocate and you have so much experience in doing it now.
Yeah.
Not only as a guest, but I mean, you're a host. You've done close to 1,000 now at this point.
Over 1,000 now. Yeah.
Over 1,000. Wow, dude, that's awesome. And you've had you've interviewed like Shaq and I think you've interviewed Ed Milet, haven't you, as well?
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah, dude, like that's awesome, man. Like do you have any interesting stories about like how you landed someone where you're like, man, that's a big name to get on, like,
I would say like the ones at the beginning meant more to me because it just felt so weird. It felt like, why is this person saying yes to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I remember with this guest in particular, and everybody might not even know who he is, but his name is Jack Canfield. He's the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, which is a book and book series that has gone on to sell over 500 million copies worldwide. 500 million copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And then they have like Chicken Soup for the Soul for families, or Chicken Soup for the Soul for runners, or Chicken Soup for the, they have all these different subcategories that they've kind of co-authored. So gotcha. Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield were the original co-authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And when I wanted to get Jack on the show, I had gotten his email from a mutual friend who basically said, like, it was, again, this is the very beginning. So I was lucky enough to get the email, but he wasn't comfortable making the introduction. He said, here's the email. Feel free to drop my name in the reach out, but he didn't like feel comfortable making an intro at that time. So I was like, okay, cool, no worries. So I reached out, and for a solid like 3 or 4 months, I didn't even know if it was the right email because I got no responses, no replies, like no indication of whether or not this was even being read. I didn't have any like open tracking software at the time. It was just like, I'm just sending this email out because this guy told me this was his email. But what I started doing was every month on autopilot, I would just reach out with an update. So the first one was like, reach out, ask to come on the show, whatever, no response.
Yeah.
Second reach out was, hey, Jack, here are the updates from last month. Here are the guests that I've gotten on recently. Here's how the show's doing. Let's schedule an interview. No response. After like 3 or 4 months, I finally got a response. And the response was basically like, no, not right now, but keep it up.
Nice.
Every month I would do it. It took me almost a full year. I think it was 10 months of reaching out every few weeks to say, here's what I've been up to. Here's the people that I'm getting on. Would you be willing to do a conversation? Yeah. And eventually it got to the point where he was like, all right, well, this dude's not going away. So let's just say yes. So he ended up saying yes. And I was able to go to his house in Santa Barbara with the videographer, set up in his living room, and do a full in-person 1-hour conversation with the guy. And then when I left, he actually wrote up an endorsement for me. I think it's even still on my website to this day. Wow. That's something about like, oh, Travis is like a personal development leader for future generations, or blah, 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 something like that. So it ended up being like a really great value piece for me, because a lot of people in the personal development authorship space know who Jack Canfield is. And so when they saw someone like Jack Canfield not only come on the show, but also in person at his house in Santa Barbara, plus be able to go to my website and see a full endorsement from him, people just started saying yes more often at that point. So that there's been several stories like that where it was just like constant communication, persistent professionalism for months and months on end, sometimes even a year plus, until people eventually just were like, all right, sure, you're clearly never going to stop emailing me, so let's just do it,
Yeah, dude. Man, that's so cool, because I imagine you're using a lot of the door-to-door sales stuff because you were used to the rejection and stuff like that. And
absolutely,
here's one thing, man, that I want you guys that are listening to take away from that is the fact that even though he got told no, it doesn't mean no forever. It's like, hey, no right now, right? But you can keep trying, man. And
Mhm.
that's been an unlock for me as I've been able to get some different guests on the podcast, man. And um yourself included, like even with Matt, I've known Matt now, we're going on 3 years, Matt
Very cool.
Beaudreau. And we've gotten pretty close, like, throughout these years, but I actually didn't feel comfortable ever asking him to connect me with anybody until we had a relationship for a couple of
Sure.
years. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, just me personally, from out of integrity, I was like, dude, I don't want to be the guy that's like, hey, taken advantage of. Right. So, and then when I asked, it was like, yeah, dude, of course, man, let's do it,
Yeah.
But that's the thing, man. It's the patience, the understanding that, yeah, you could be rejected, but that's not an eternal rejection. You're not going to, you have an opportunity. And then hitting these milestones as you bring on these guests, like you get endorsements like the one you got. And it's like, it can like level you up and level up level you up in ways that you never thought possible.
100%. That's it. The same of the game is just staying in it long enough to be able to get the results.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And, and we live in a world right now, man, where it's all instant gratification, right? And they want it fast. They want the success. They see guys like Rogan or like Chris Williamson, or, any of these guys that are like big time names right now, Sean Ryan show, right? All these guys. And, they're looking at them like overnight success, but dude, like they've been doing it. Rogan's been doing it for years,
Yep.
And it's that consistency. It's that knowing that it's a long game, not a short game. And, and a big lesson I've taken, man, from podcasting is that it's not so much about the audience building or the growing of the following or the growing. It's really about what you touched on earlier, which is like getting around people with expertise, leaning in on that wisdom and being able, like, because very much so, man, when I bring guests on, like I learn so much just as being a host and try to develop questions. And and sometimes the conversation goes ways that I couldn't account for, couldn't plan for. And it ends up being way better than I even imagined it in my own mind, and you just learn so much. And then your audience, just as a byproduct, gets some of that as well. Right. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, you don't have to be the expert to start, man, but you do have to start in order to be the expert. And when you're starting with a show, like I did with mine, you don't have to be the person that's already at the destination that's calling everybody to the destination in order to make it successful. Now, shows that start like that tend to have a faster path to audience growth, right? Like you have like a Alex Ramosi who blew up with his online brand, his personal brand, his content, his podcast, his YouTube channel, everything that he's putting out.
Yeah.
He did it from the position of, I've reached the destination that you're trying to reach. Now come visit, now come this way. And I'll help you get to where I am. And that blew up much, much faster because he has the result that people are looking for. But it doesn't mean that that's what you have to do in order to be able to get that result. You can also start like I look at it like I'm the captain of the ship. So it's like we have an idea that that's the destination that we're heading to. Like the destination we're heading to is be better at whatever, building relationships or fill in the blank for whatever problem you're trying to solve with your content.
Yeah. I'm
just the captain of the ship. I haven't been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, but I'm going to do my best to provide the best possible information. And I'm going to be captaining the ship. Why don't you come on board with us? And we're going to take this journey together. And I'm going to do my best to go find people who are at the destination that we're trying to get to. I'm going to bring them onto the ship to help us, to guide us and get us there a little bit faster. But I'm taking this journey with you guys. Like I'm not the guru. I'm not the expert. I'm just here to guide. I'm here to disseminate information from other people, from other sources, and then give it and communicate it clearly the best way I know how.
No, that full transparency. And I think that's why Hormozi, relates so much to everybody, right? That kind of gravitates towards, because I'm a fan as well in terms of him. And it's just kind of that realistic approach. And I think with him too, it was, he had enough money to get volume out there, right? So he could have like 260 whatever pieces of content he releases weekly, right? To really promote his stuff and feed it into the machine of his personal brand. And people will look at that and be like, man, I can't do that. Like you can do it a different way, right? Like you're saying. And so yeah, man, I totally see that, and I get why he, he's brilliant when it comes to that. When it comes to just understanding how to present something and show like, hey man, like this is a path. This is a path that you can take. So
Yeah, he's a great communicator. You know,
Yeah.
he's like sometimes the best practitioners get lost in the sauce, and they're so proficient and good at what they do that it's really difficult for them to, I don't know if dumb it down is even the right terminology, but at least communicate it. You know, like doing, like, those are two different skill sets, like being really good at what you do and then being able to help other people figure out how to do what you do are two completely different skills. And some of the best practitioners are not good at that other thing. And some of the best communicators haven't actually done the thing. So when you have somebody who's actually good at those things, I think they have an advantage to be able to have their content seen by more people, because they do both. And he's a prime example of that, of somebody who really thoughtfully thinks through how to present the information that like when he writes a book, he doesn't just hire a ghostwriter to like do a couple interviews with him and write a book for him. Like he spends, years writing and then rewriting 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 one more time. And then when he thinks it's all done, rewriting one more time and then putting out the product. So he does a really great job of disseminating the information, which is not something that's common. That's something that also Naval Ravikant is brilliant at. Somebody who's a deep practitioner, who's ultra successful in his own right in so many different paths that he's taken and ventures that he started. But he's also just a wise sage that knows how to communicate the things that he's learned to a wider, audience of people. And that's also showed up in his content, the things that he does.
When you look at, guys that are in the space, like the podcasting space, what do you take as some of the fundamental elements that they have that make their episodes so compelling? Like, a guy like Chris Williamson or even Rogan. And have you adopted some of those frameworks for yours? Like, when you go in as a host, what's your game plan to make it effective and to get the best out of your guest?
I think if you're constantly looking at what everybody else is doing, then you're never going to come up with your own secret sauce. Yeah. And that's what every one of those people have. They have their own secret sauce. Gotcha. Chris Williamson he's very similar to like a Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
But he's not Tim Ferriss. He's got the Chris-esque, way of asking questions. The cool British accent doesn't hurt either. That's for sure. More psychologically impactful, like actually from real data and studies, that people with a British accent tend to be more trusted, especially in the States. I don't know if that's true in the UK or not, because everybody's got one, but in the States, that's why you see people hiring like British voiceovers and like British talent to run ads and stuff like that, because it's more trustworthy for whatever reason. So he's got that little bit of an advantage baked into his accent, but also he's a great question asker. He's eternally curious. But like I said, he also has his own style where he's really good at building frameworks through which he has made decisions and then communicating that framework to other people. So even when he's having like really smart people on, he'll have like a social psychologist or an evolutionary biology expert on or something
or
like
Naval,
that.
Like you just had Naval on too, right? Just recently. On. Yeah.
He will hear them explain something to him. Yeah. And then he'll come up with a name for that thing that person just explained. And even that person will be like, oh yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. That's a great way to say it. So he's really good at coming up with these mental models and frameworks and then giving that back to his audience as a way to implement the complicated thing that his guest just said. Whereas a Rogan is he's a world-class conversationalist. Yeah. Regardless of what you think about him, I think it's wild the vitriol that he receives now just because of the last election cycle, when he's gotten involved in other election cycles on the other side, and now people are mad at him. Anyway, before I digress too far down that rabbit hole, but now people are like, see people all the time just calling him stupid and calling him dumb, and he's just unintelligent and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, this is just you being a hater, clearly, because even if you don't like the guy, you got to be able to give, credit where credit's due. And he's an expert communicator. He just is. He's an expert communicator, and he is above expert conversationalist. Having a 3-hour conversation with anybody that's somewhat interesting and compelling the whole time is already difficult. To have a 3-hour conversation with the volume and of people that he has, as well as the variety of backgrounds, like both volume and variety, and still be able to have the conversation, because he's not an interviewer. Like, he's not Larry King. Larry King asks questions, and he would talk for 5 to 10% of the total interview time, and it would be mostly focused on the guest. Joe is a conversationalist, like through and through. If you did a breakdown of some of his episodes, like, he's talking as often as the guest is talking. And he'll switch it up a little bit, right? If it's like a comic or a UFC person, something that he knows a lot about, he might even talk more than the guest does. Whereas if he brings on a social psychologist, he might talk a lot less on that one, and maybe he's talking 25-30% of the time. But you'll notice, like, he doesn't ask a ton of questions. If you listen to him a lot, he's just really good at saying something that prompts a response from the guest without it being a question. And that's why I say he's more of a conversationalist than he is an interviewer. And he's really, really good at that. And so if you try to come in and do what Rogan does, you're probably not going to do it very well, because, first of all, before he even started the podcast, like, not only does he have like 15 years of experience and thousands of episodes on his podcast, before he started the podcast, he was an actor on a sitcom. He was a touring stand-up comedian, and he was the host of Fear Factor. He talked for a living. He communicated for a living to people from all walks of life, different cultural backgrounds, different perspectives than he had. And so by the time he started the podcast, he had a really interesting, eclectic, weird group of friends that had interesting things to say. So you had some of his early episodes with, like, the Alex Joneses of the world, and you have some of his early episodes with, Duncan Trussell and some of his friends that were in the stand-up comedy world. Like, they just had more interesting things to say, and he was really good at pulling that information out of them. And then you extrapolate that over the course of the last, 15 years since he started the show, and he's only gotten better and better and better at it. So I think it's sometimes a mistake to just look at other people doing and do exactly what they do in this type of a world, in the creator world. Like I said, I'm a big fan of doing that, like, when it comes to like sales or something like that, because it's a duplicatable, repeatable process. And if you get this lead and you say these things, then you're probably going to lead them down a path where you're going to be able to close them. You're going to make a little bit of money. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Do exactly what that person did until you're proficient enough at it to add in your own, flavor. But with the creator world, man, if you spend too much time focusing on what everybody else is doing, then you're never going to figure out what it is that you bring to the table. And you're never going to build that confidence muscle anyway. So even if you did get an opportunity to explode your brand by doing something like going on Rogan or something like that, you're probably going to fumble the bag if you're so concerned with, like, just being a duplicate of Tim Ferriss or being a duplicate of Joe Rogan. It's like, you got to bring your own style and your own flavor, and understand that it might take a while to build a fan base for whatever that particular style or flavor might be.
Dude, that's so good. And I love the breakdown of that too, man. Cause I see your analytical mind at work as you're listening to this, because I know you're probably listening to it in two ways. Like, you're listening to the content or watching the content, but you're also at kind of, admiring like how they do. And Rogan definitely has that style of just bringing up like topics, right? Like trending topics, and he'll just say like, oh, what do you think about this? Or like, oh, have you seen this lately? This news in the story lately? And then they just start talking about it, like two friends at a coffee shop talking.
Right.
And that's what's intriguing, is that you're just kind of that third party fly on the wall in the middle of this conversation. You just get to hear it. You get to be a part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Dude. So what about yourself, man? Like, how have you come up with sort of your unique style and framework as how you approach it? Because like I said, you've interviewed so many different guests, like these high achievers. And I'm sure, I don't know how you probably have to adapt how you approach depending on the guest that you have. Do you have like a list of questions that you bring up all the time, or how do you normally go into it?
I've leaned into this kind of like story framework, where I'm just really interested in the person themselves and like their personal story, like their life circumstances, what hand they were dealt, and how they played that hand to get where they are. So if you listen to a lot of my conversations, they're loosely structured on like a timeline based way that makes sense in my brain as I go throughout the conversation. So I don't have to have a ton of prep done. The more prep I've done, the better the conversation is, because I can take the conversation toward different, areas.
Of course.
But it's not super prepped as in, like, I have a list of 25 questions that I want to ask. It's more like I'm prepped as in I have consumed so much of this person's content or information, whether it's reading their books or listening to their podcast or following their career or whatever it is, that I'm so saturated with the knowledge of that person that I can then just follow the timeline that I have in my head during the course of the conversation. But I always liken it back to the timeline because, like I said, it makes sense as a logical flow of the conversation. So I typically start like early days, tell me about what it was like being 10-year-old you. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, why were you that version of yourself at 10 years old? Like, tell me about your parents. What did your parents do? What was their background? What did your grandparents influence them? Have you always been in the States, or did somebody, come over from Europe at this generation? Like, I want to know, like, all the different pieces of background information. And then we move into like, okay, early life, okay, early career. And then like, we'll drill in on certain things that I think are super interesting. Like if they just like glaze over something because it's part of their story and they're so used to saying it, and most people let them go and just say it. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, chill out for 1 second here. Yeah. You said this like it was just automatic, but it was actually crazy what you just said. Let's drill down on that a little bit more. And then we'll spend 10, 20 minutes on that. But then I'll always be like, okay, now let's get back into the story. So you mentioned you were like right around here at college time. Why did you choose this for your major? Or why did you drop out of school? Or did you end up finishing? Or I noticed you got your master's degree. What was that for? Like, so I tend to like really stick into the story and then get caught up to where we are now. And then like throughout the conversation, I'll just drill down on the things that I think are really interesting.
What I want to go into next, man, is let's go into Guestio and the platform that you've built, because this is interesting. It's it's something that, because you're in the podcasting world, and you essentially created a platform where you could bring podcasters and guests and bring them together, and even allow the podcasters to get paid for that. Can you speak to that and where that kind of came from as well?
Yeah. So this was me just scratching my own itch, man. I was banging my head against the wall, trying to get good guests on the show and constantly level up. And I used Cameo a couple of times and just didn't get great results because that's not what Cameo was built for. So I was like, if this platform existed, I would be a customer. So we ended up just building the platform. And then we realized like pretty quickly into it that that more people were trying to get booked on shows rather than shows trying to get good guests. So that's when we introduced the podcasters get paid for guest spots on their show. Caused a lot of like, not uproar, but at least conversation in the industry, because some people looked at it as like payola and you shouldn't be doing that. But then I was always on the other side of it, where I was like, look, these are not staff journalists at a magazine or newspaper. Like they don't get paid for sharing their opinions or for writing content. They're paying to put this content out there. And so what I started realizing was happening was like all these PR firms were jumping up and getting podcast interviews. But I started realizing like the podcaster was the only one that wasn't benefiting from the transaction. It was like they get content, sure, but like they could get content for free just by sending a DM if they really wanted to. So now they're like, the PR agency is making money by putting the guest on the show because the guest is paying the PR agency. The guest is making money because the guest is getting on the show and selling something to the audience. That's the only reason they hired a PR firm, was to get awareness around a book or a product or something that they're working on. So it was like, so the podcaster, who's the person putting all the time, energy, and effort and money into building this audience, now gets $0 from the transaction, where the PR agency is making money and the guest is making money. I was like, this is broken. It's messed up. Like the podcaster should be able to get at least some like rev share or something from the PR agencies that are making all this money off of their audiences. Because that's like, if you're a PR agency like that, like your product is other people's audiences. That's your only product. Is inventory from other people who've built the actual value piece in the transaction. So our question was like, can we get the podcaster a little bit of money in this transaction? And that's how Guestio came out.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. And do you guys, how has that evolved over time? Because I know when I jumped on and I didn't take it as advantage of it as I should have. And I started sourcing my own network and all that to get guests on. But how has it evolved in terms of, are you guys doing any type of training now where, like, with people starting podcasts, and do they get on there? Do they get any like a leg up on training or anything like that now? Or is it just like, hey, if you already have a show, let's go ahead and connect you and get guests on?
Yeah. So we're actually in the middle of selling that right now, Guestio. So in terms
really?
of transitions
Okay,
right now and what it's going to look like in the future, you'd have to ask the acquirer. But yeah, we switched it along the way just to be more like more guest friendly. Just because we realized, like I said, that was a much bigger market. There were more people that were actively trying to get booked on shows than there are shows that are actively trying to get good guests. There's just not that many shows out there compared to how many guests there are. So that was kind of what it evolved to eventually, was like we're more focused on getting people booked on shows than we are on shows getting good guests.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know that you guys were making an exit on that.
Yeah, well, to be fair, it's not public, so
okay. Yeah.
By the time this comes out, though, it should be. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. Yeah, it'll be probably another week and a half or so before this comes out. If that's okay.
Yep.
If you need me to take it out, you let me know.
So, no, that's all good, man. Yep.
Yeah. Cool, brother. Dude. So with everything that you're involved in, as far as like entrepreneurship, and everything you're doing with the podcasting and all that, how are you balancing that with the family life, man? Because I see you still being a present husband, a present father. And I remember, talking to Joanna through the email. She's like, he's got to go pick up his kids at this time, so we can't do it at this time. So we're, figuring out that. So I know that that's super important to you. I'm just wondering, how are you balancing that? What are you doing?
Oh man, first of all, I think balance is a myth. I don't think it's possible to be balanced. I think you drive yourself crazy if you're shooting for balance. My thing is, I just try to be wherever I am 100%. So, and I obviously don't hit that ideal all the time. But that's what I try to do, is like, if I'm with my kids, I try to be with my kids, and I try to have my phone somewhere else where I'm not being distracted. If I'm working, I try to be working and I'm not with my kids, because for a while, man, it was like, I would feel guilty when I was working because I knew I should be with my kids. And then it was like, I would feel guilty when I was with my kids because I knew my business needed attention. And the bottom line is, like, you have to be able to be a master of your calendar, schedule everything on the calendar, and then do that thing that you have scheduled. So if you're busy as an entrepreneur and you got a bunch of stuff going on, like we all do, great, good for you. That's also part of what your calling is as a father. Like, you are supposed to be the protector and the provider. So you can't give up those things in an effort to spend more time with your kids. Because then they're going to see the example of somebody who's not actually providing for them. It's like, you might be able to spend all the time in the world with them, but if they're worried about where, their next meal is coming from, or you can't put them in a good enough school because you're not making enough money, they're also going to learn from that. So you want to pass on the ideals of, like, work is a good thing, productivity is a good thing, purpose, fulfillment. These are all worthy goals, without completely sacrificing all the time that you have available with them. So whatever your schedule looks like, man, you have to schedule time in with your family. So for me, like, picking up my kids is something that I do most days of the week. My wife drops them off at school. I try to pick them up from school. And then once they're home, I try to spend time with them at that time. So I have like calendar blocks that just don't allow me to schedule anything in those time periods. And I try to be as strict as I can with that. Like I said, I'm probably not as good as it as I like to think that I am, just because I work from home. So sometimes, like even yesterday, the day before, I was with my son. I picked him up early from school and we're hanging out in the backyard, and I was spending some time with him, but I also had to be working because it was like 1:30 in the afternoon. And so I was like, I just sat him down. I looked him in the eye, and I think it's really important to not talk to your kids while you're looking at your phone. It's just like, if you're talking to them, look at them. I think that's going to come back to bite you. I just, your kid's going to be distracted with other things and not interested in hanging out with you soon enough. And if you train them that your phone is more important to you than it is to look them in the eye, then don't be surprised when they're 14, 15, 16, and you're trying to get something out of them, to have a relationship with them, and they're just looking at their phone and not looking you in the eye. It's like, well, they learned that from you. Don't put that on them. That's not their immaturity. That's your example that showed them that this is more important. And obviously your business is more important than their social media activity as a 14-year-old. Obviously, I'm not saying that those are the same thing, but they don't know any different. They're just picking up what they're seeing from you. So I try to at least, like, I was doing something on my phone. My son was trying to get me to do something with him. So I put my phone down for a second. I looked him in the eye and I was like, buddy, I was like, the really cool thing about daddy's work is that I get to come and pick you up from school sometimes like this, and we get to hang out a little bit. I was like, the bummer thing about daddy's work though is that I have to constantly be doing some things. So right now I need to respond to a few of these messages, and then in a few minutes, then we can do whatever it is that he was asking me to do. I think it was like fill up water balloons or something like that. It's like, well, we can do that for sure. Just give me a few minutes, and I need to respond to some of these people, because this is the nature of daddy's work. This is like the nature of what I got to do in order to be able to live the life that we get to live. It's going to require some things from me on this end. So, your kids are smart, have the conversations with them, and they obviously don't fully understand everything. And it doesn't mean they're not going to interrupt you 30 seconds later to keep asking you to fill up water balloons until you're done with your messages. But I at least can point to that as the frame of the conversation. And he at least understands that from a perspective like, okay, dad's not ignoring me. He just told me he has to do some work really quick, and then we can hang out a little bit. So wherever you are, be there. Don't shoot for balance. I think balance is a myth. And if you try to use that as your number one goal, I think you're going to constantly be frustrated, and you're never going to feel good about the work that you're doing. And then be a master of your calendar. Schedule the time with your family, just like you schedule time for a Zoom call with your team or whatever it is. You have to be intentional, because it's not just going to take care of itself.
Yeah, I love that, man. That intentionality. I've always found it difficult too, man, because I work from home as well. And now with the business podcast and all this stuff that I'm doing, it's hard to turn off the entrepreneurial mind, right? And sometimes, when you're with your kids and you're playing, and I go downstairs and I'll play with them for a little bit, they're homeschooled too, so they're here, right? And my wife stay at home, so we're all kind of here at the house most of the time. And I'm in my office working and all that, but they have access to me. And I'll be down there and I'll play with them sometimes, and then my mind will be thinking about something business related or some sort of message that I got to get back to. And I like space out, man. My wife sometimes has to tell me like, hey, are you here right now? Like,
right.
Yeah, she's kind of my checks and balances that way, and I got to come back, right? But such a good point, man. I don't know if when you experience that, because I'm sure you do, how do you go back to being present? Do you have anything there?
It depends on what I'm getting distracted by, because sometimes, like if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, sometimes things require your attention, and you can't just pick it up tomorrow. It's like this has to be solved right now. This is like this fire is burning inside of my business, and if I don't go put out the fire, it's not going to go away. So sometimes it might require your attention. If it does require your attention, again, have the intentional conversation and leave the room. Don't be above like getting off the couch. Like if you and your whole family are all hanging out and your mind is elsewhere and you're distracted, leave the room and go to your home office or go outside, go for a walk by yourself and do that work you need to do, and don't be there for a second. Take care of what you need to take care of. But if it's not something that requires your attention and it's just you spacing, then put your phone on airplane mode and set it on the counter. Get it away from you, get it out of your hands. Sometimes it's simple for me. It's just like writing something down. Like sometimes like I have an idea in my head and I know that if I don't take action on it right now, that nothing's going to happen with it. So like, okay, keep a journal next to you, or have your phone there for taking notes, and send yourself a quick voice memo so you don't forget what you're thinking about. Because sometimes it's important, but it says it's important, but it doesn't require your urgent attention right now, or urgent immediate attention. So if it's less important, but it's still something that you want to make sure that you come back to later, then get it out of your head, write it down so that you can focus on the family, and just draw your attention back to them. Because you don't want to be in a, I don't know, man, like your kids are only small kids once. So, you don't want to get to the point where you're again trying to do work when your kids are 16 that you should have been doing when they were 6. And now you're trying to play catch up to get their attention and get them to be a part of your life.
Yeah, man, the technology advancement stuff is what kind of irks me with that, as they get older. You were talking about how, they're 14, they're on their phone, they're in social media, and I don't know what social media is going to look like in another, 5-10 years or so. But the thing we've been talking about a lot on the Apogee side, man, is AI.
Yeah.
And just kind of the advancements, like the fast advancements we've been making on that. How are you kind of sort of embracing that in the business realm or in the podcasting realm? Are you kind of like, hey, I'm advocating for it, you want to use it, or are you kind of weary of it as well?
I would say a little bit of both.
Okay.
I am never for stopping innovation for the sake of keeping up some illusion that we already have it figured out and we don't need to continue to do better. That's like that's the stuff I get weary of, is like right now it's social media. Like social media is the villain of the last 10, 15 years. And then people can just rush to painting Mark Zuckerberg as Hitler himself type of a thing. And it's like, I don't know, man, like you can't convince me that Mark Zuckerberg in his dorm room in Harvard was like, you know what I really want to build? I want to build an app. Then this app is going to mess with the mental health of an entire young generation. And like, it's going to cause insecurities. And like, that's going to be awesome. Like, that's obviously not what he was building that app for. He was building it for all the amazing things that it does. And there are a lot of amazing things that come out of it. And so I kind of grow weary of the people who romanticize old times, because that's not how Western society works. That's not how America was formed. We're always forward facing. We're always looking to the future. We're always making innovations. We're always trying to improve the quality of life. It's just that when you make more innovations, it provides more problems. That's how innovation works. Like it doesn't solve all problems. It just makes problems different and puts them in different spaces, which requires more innovation on that front. So like, I hope that in 10 years, when my kids are in their teens, I hope that they can't even get on social media. I would like to see some sort of like age limit or something like that, because now we have enough data. Like I said, when social media first came out, we didn't have any data to know that it was like actually messing with people's mental health, causing deep rooted insecurities, like leading to depression, anxiety, and all these, terrible outcomes that social media has. It doesn't mean that we get rid of social media and that was dumb and we shouldn't do that. It's like, there's a lot of really great things that have come out of it. It just means that we have to now innovate about the problems that we're experiencing from the past innovations that we've had. So with AI, that's kind of how I feel about it too. Is like a lot of people are like, oh, we just can't, don't use it. Don't, create this kind of fear mongering attitude about something that has a lot of potential to do a lot of really, really great things and bring part of the world from being third world to being first world in a single generation. Like, it has the ability to do so many really, really cool things. And so to completely villainize something because of the downsides, to me, just doesn't make sense as a strategy for moving forward. So I am very much a proponent with just saying that, like, with any innovation comes a lot of downsides. And just like good people are going to use this to do really, really great things in the world, bad people are going to use this to do some really nefarious, insidious things in the world. So, you can't just keep your kids off of it. You can't just prevent them from, like, you don't want them to get into that new world and not be able to add value in that world because they don't even understand how it operates, because mom and dad gate kept AI from them for their entire lives. The future of work is going to be highly impacted by AI. Your kids' ability to learn new skills, your kids' ability to create, like, all of that stuff is going to be dependent on their ability to use and leverage AI to their advantage. So yeah, I'm a proponent. We use it, I use it for a lot of research things. I use it for a lot of, I don't use it for things that replace me currently. Like, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of writing content that's in my name that AI wrote. I don't like that. But I did recently write a chapter for a book that I'm thinking about working on more. And when I was done with that chapter, there was this cool ChatGPT extension called, I think it's called Creative Writing Coach. And so instead of having ChatGPT write the whole chapter, I wrote the chapter myself in like a Google Doc, and then I copied and pasted the whole chapter in the Creative Writing Coach like GPT extension. And then it read through the chapter and then told me what to do to like make it better. Like, told me, hey, maybe some, like, this part was really serious and you throw in these jokes. And I think it'd be better if you would live in the seriousness of that moment and let it sink in with the reader a little bit more, rather than trying to take them out of it with this joke that didn't really make sense. So it was actually really insightful to helping me write a better chapter. So I like that application of it better than like just doing nothing and having ChatGPT come up with something. because I think that'll be what differentiates the stuff that really takes off in the future, is the stuff that's not written by AI, but is like AI enhanced almost, at least for now, you know, because I just don't think that it's good enough now. Maybe in a few years it'll be good enough to just like listen to a few of my podcast episodes and then be able to write something that I look at and I'm like, that sounds exactly how I would have written it. Maybe that's coming, and it probably is coming. Right now it's not that good, so I like it more for, you know, how can it give me a framework to then work through, or how can it improve what I'm already, you know, working on, or the things that I'm already somewhat proficient at. So that's how we kind of use it internally.
Yeah, I like that collaborative kind of work, right, with the AI, as opposed to it kind of doing that, because I'm with you on that too. I wouldn't want it to write the content for me.
Yeah.
Right. Just there's something about me. Just I want to be able to write my own unique thoughts, but the idea of it assessing what you're writing and giving you suggestions and, you know, on how to make it better, that's a pretty cool collaborative way to do it, man. And yeah, and I've used it in interesting ways for like outlining courses and like, you know, even crafting offers, right?
Yeah.
Like figuring out and using frameworks from like Alex Hormozy or something like that, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's yeah, man, it's very powerful. Where I'm weary of it, man, is like these stories of, you know, these kids having like AI relationships, right? Like where it leads to them committing suicide or something like that because the AI told it to, you know, or where like, you know, the robotics and AI component where they could essentially make a full blown like female, right? That acts and talks and
AI female. Yeah.
Dude, that's a trip, man. That's the stuff that I'm like, man.
Yeah. Cause the question to me is like, does it replace the connection, the desire for connection that all humans have? And I don't see that that's going to be the case anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's really the big thing for me, is like, it's like social media in that regard, where people started, even in the dating world, people started outsourcing skill building to the ease of technology. And then now they have to deal with the repercussions of not having built the skill. Yeah. So like, social media does not replace connection. It's more media than it is social. So you can't use it as a way to combat inner feelings of loneliness, because it's just going to lead to more loneliness and isolation, because it's a media platform. It's not a social platform. And so with AI, I think it's kind of the same way, where it's like, if you look at this as a replacement instead of an enhancement, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. And I think that your mental health is up for grabs. You know, we can't, I don't see how we can replace the need for human connection. Like, it's so hardwired into our biology, you know, for so long. Like, we are a tribal people. That's how human beings are. You know, we've been relying on each other for tens of thousands of years, you know, for people to, like, hunter-gatherer tribes. Like, if you were isolated from the group, you're dead. Yeah. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There's only a period of time that you can go surviving on your own without being a part of that tribe. So that's why we have anxiety, and that's why our mental health worsens when we have internal feelings of loneliness. Because if you're constantly feeling lonely, you never get out of a parasympathetic state. Like, you're constantly in a state of fight or flight, because your biology is hardwired to believe that if you do not get connected or feel belonging to a certain community or tribe, then you are going to die. Just like the same way that if you saw a tiger around the corner, your fight or flight kicks in and you got to run away. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same exact thing that centers on the community thing. So if you don't have a strong sense of community or belongingness, then you're constantly going to be in this eternal state of anxiety, which is what leads people down these dark mental wellness holes, and then starts affecting physical health. It's pretty crazy, but loneliness is as bad for your physical health as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
That's wild.
And that's from the U.S. Surgeon General. That's not from some like random like third party podcast I listen to, you know, from people who aren't in the cultural zeitgeist. Like, this is literally the U.S. Surgeon General coming out and saying, statistically, with the data that we have, smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day is as bad for you as being lonely for your physical health, not just mental health. That was the part that surprised me, is like loneliness leads to an increase in all cause mortality. All of the four major diseases, like neurodegenerative disorders like dementia or Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, every single one of those is increased odds of getting one of those things just from being lonely. So you can't outsource connection to AI. You can't outsource connection to dating apps or to social media. It's a skill that you have to learn. You have to learn how to be connected and stay connected to other humans, or I think that you're always going to walk around feeling lonely. I pity a world that is full of lonely young men. That is a recipe for disaster, man.
Very much so, bro. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I bring up that fear, right? That where instead of them trying to connect with like how we have, like where we had to go talk to the girl and we had to go, quarter, that they'll think that that's too hard or too difficult. Yeah. And they'll resort to some sort of an AI type relationship where that'll suffice for them to fill that gap of loneliness. And yeah, that's just something that I'm weary of and cautious of, man. But
absolutely, dude.
Yeah. Dude, and I've heard studies, man, too, of I don't know if there's like a village somewhere out in Europe or so. I don't know if it's Italy or so that they said that it's like where people live the longest. Like
there's 5 of them. So there's 5. Okay. There's 5 blue. They call them blue zones. Oh wow. Which has the highest concentration of centenarians on the planet, which are people who live to be past 100 years old. Yeah. So there's 5 of these blue zones, and there's been a lot of studies that have come out about them.
Yeah.
They don't follow one diet. The only like commonalities between their diet is basically just whole foods, like good food, but it's not like vegan or keto or any of these other like paleo or whatever. Yeah. It's a variety of diets. Just mainly they eat food that doesn't have a bunch of garbage in it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But the other core common denominator is community. Is a sense of belonging. And I don't think that's by accident. You know what I mean? I think that has a really, really big thing to do with it. Because even in some of these communities, they're chain smokers, man. They've been smoking since their 20s, and they're 103 and they still light up. It's like the things that we point out as like the main villains of not to endorse smoking cigarettes. Okay. Smoking cigarettes is a bad thing. Don't do that. It's terrible for your health overall. But my point is saying that like, you would think that wouldn't be the case. You're like, wait, you're 103, you've smoked for 80 years. It doesn't make any sense. But turns out there are some other things that are potentially more important, and community and belonging seems to be one of those things.
Yeah. And I've heard Alex say this, that you can't AI community. Yeah. Right. And I think you can't AI podcasting and doing this kind of thing either, man. Like there's no way, Yeah.
There's no substitute for the work that's required. Even these relationships, like the AI relationship things, like I can only imagine that the AI is going to start nagging you just like a regular wife would. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be able to get away from it. Like that's part of what makes that's part of what makes the relationship interesting. It makes it dynamic. It forces you to grow. It forces you to learn. It forces you outside of your comfort zone. It forces you to have friction, because the friction leads to growth, which also leads to fulfillment, which also leads to purpose. Like you can't have any of these things by just pressing an easy button. That's not how it works. Like you have to work through the difficult parts. That's part of what makes it worth doing. It's part of what makes it worth having. That's why lottery winners go broke within 5 years, 3 years, probably even. I forget the actual number, but it's like 80-something% or something like that. And it's like 60 or 70% of like NFL players go broke within a few years of leaving the league. It's the same thing in relationships. It's like you can't just easy button your way into a lot of money. If you get a windfall of money that you didn't earn, chances are you're going to lose all that money as soon as just as fast as you got it in, and your mental state is going to be worse afterwards, because now you know what it was like to have a bunch of money and you don't have it now, and you have no way to duplicate winning the lottery again. If you make a bunch of money in a business and then you lose it all, well, you can go make it back because you at least had some sort of principles or knowledge base to go make that money back. Yeah. If you won the lottery and you don't have any skills on how to earn income or manage money or make good investments or any of that stuff, and you lose all of it, you're starting from scratch. You don't have any of those things to rely on. You didn't do the work required to get the reward that you wanted to get. So that's why they go broke, and then their mental health usually takes a nosedive after that as well. So, like I said, there just isn't an easy button. And if there was one, you shouldn't press it. Because it's not actually going to make your life easier. It's an illusion. The work is what's required to live the purposeful, meaningful, fulfilling life, which leads to a broader feeling of happiness and a stronger sense of community in your tribe. Like you can't avoid the work, man. And so if AI and social media and some of these other things like are leading you down a path of like just pressing the easy button over and over and over again, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, I agree there, man. Very much so. Dude, I want to hit you with the last question, man, to honor your time. In your opinion, what are the 3 most important traits that make a dad a good family leader?
3 most important traits. Self-control. Let me go a step further than that. I'll say just like relationship to self.
Okay.
Because there's a lot within that. Like that's where I would put self-awareness. That's where I'd put self-confidence, self-esteem, self-control. Like the mastery of oneself should be at the top of every father's list, because it all matters in your relationship with yourself will always be the direct indicator of how good your relationship is with other people, and especially with the people that are closest to you, meaning your kids or your spouse. It's you can't get away from it. So if you have really, really low self-esteem, if you have low self-worth, then you're probably not going to be as great of a parent, because you're probably going to be searching for ways for your kids or for your wife to make you feel more worthy, to make you have more self-esteem. And the bottom line is they're not going to be able to help do that. That's a you problem, not a them problem. So the more burden you put on them to fulfill that part of you, the more you're going to strain those relationships. And then I threw in the self-control. Like I let off with self-control because I think it's really important for men to, embody that whole mantra of be it's better to be the warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, type of a thing. But if you don't have self-control, then that's how you can have really bad stories when your kids grow up. Like the last thing I would want is for my kids to grow up knowing their dad is somebody who couldn't control his own temper, somebody who genuinely scared them because I got in their face one too many times. But again, like that self-control stems from something with self-esteem and self-worth, because that's the only reason that dudes are doing that. They feel disrespected. They feel inferior. They feel like the people in their life don't respect them like they should be respected. And maybe they don't. But that does not mean that you have permission to fly off the handle and scare your entire family into submission. Yeah. That's not the behavior of a man. That's the behavior of an insecure little boy who never grew up. And I'm sorry if you have some deep wounds that you need to heal in order to feel worthy. And I'm sorry that maybe your parents treated you a certain way, or maybe they abused you. I'm sorry that those things happened to you, but it does not give you license or excuse to repeat the cycle and do it to your own family. So I think that's like a really big piece of it. So I'll say like the first thing would be relationship to self-awareness, self-worth, self-control, self-discipline. And that to me is like the number one thing, because even if you say the wrong things, your kids will learn from your example more than they'll learn from anything else. So if they see you having discipline, getting out of bed, working on your goals and dreams, staying in the gym, staying in good physical shape, making good nutritional decisions, being a good husband to your wife, like if they see you doing that, they'll pick up on that more than anything that you tell them to do. So like to me, the biggest thing is like mastery of self from your relationship with yourself. Secondly, I would say empathy. I think empathy is a highly underrated characteristic, especially for men. Women tend to be the more empathetic person in the house. And I think most men could stand to have a little bit more empathy in their lives for a variety of reasons. but especially as it relates to your relationship with your kids and your wife, instead of just thinking about it from your perspective all the time, it might be helpful to put on their glasses for a second and see the world how they're seeing it, because then you can lead anybody better if you increase your ability to empathize with the people that you're leading. And then lastly, I would say, I mean, this is going to sound super kind of woo-woo a little bit, but love, something that I don't think that men have been historically okay with showing or being comfortable with talking about. But, you know, I think being willing to show, display, and articulate the love that you have for the people around you goes a really long way, especially with your kids and especially with your son. If you're a father to a son, I think that stuff goes, you know, a really long way with them. Like your kids should never have to earn your love, you know, approval, or maybe like, I'm proud of you type things. Like, okay, well, you don't want to hand that out like candy, you know, because you don't want to, hey, I'm proud of you for being mediocre. Like, okay, well, is that the behavior you want to reinforce? Probably not, you know, but you never have to earn my love. And you should never have to feel like because you acted a certain way or you did something you weren't supposed to, or you did something that you knew I wasn't going to be okay with, you shouldn't have to question whether or not, like, I love you unconditionally. It's literally unconditional. It can't be earned. It is by very nature of the fact that you are my son that I love you, and you should always know that. And if you don't know that, that's not a you thing, that's a me thing, because I need to figure out how to display that better for you, like whatever love language that is for that particular kid. Like, figure out a way to show that to them, because that's my thing, man. Like, we're parents. We're going to screw up so many things. That's like the worst part of being a parent, bro, is like when you realize that you're a parent and you're like, I can do my best. I can read every book. I go to every seminar. I listen to every podcast, and I'm still going to screw up so many things.
Yeah.
But if you can get across like the main things to your kids, I think that at the end of the day, like, they'll come to terms with it and they'll forgive the downfalls. That's why I say, like, keeping the main things. Like, how's your relationship with yourself? You know, do you at least try to be empathetic toward the people in your family? And then do you love your kids unconditionally? And do you constantly make sure that they're aware of that and that they don't have to like go earn your love? You know, like, if you can get those things across to them, you know, I think that in the future, they'll be a little bit more, you know, forgiving when it comes to all the other things that I'm for sure messing up on completely and fumbling the bag on. You know, I'm no expert. I always tell people, like, whenever I give parenting advice, like, man, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying my best like everybody else is. But I also think that the effort is what should be praised rather than being perfect, because nobody's going to be.
Yeah, no, dude, I love that. And I think the love component really is like the overarching thing, right? Because it's the love of self and then the love of others with the empathy, right? So you're kind of putting those two components together. And then when you're showing empathy to your family like that, I think your kids will be more forgiving. At least I'd like to. My kids are still young too. My oldest is 6, and I have 3. And they're all very different personalities. So I love them equally, but I have to show them love and affection differently because they respond differently, right? So
Yeah.
But my hope is that, when us showing that empathy, and us, like you did with your son, explaining when you have to focus on work versus focus on him, standing on that as the foundation in your household, and you have a home of peace and love and empathy, and everybody has self-love for each other and their own selves, right? Like, dude, like, I think that's a recipe for a good human.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Still mistakes, still things, still flawed, you know, but forgiveness there as well, which is what we need, man. So
100%, dude.
I love it, dude. So what's next for you, man? After, Gestio, everything that's going on right now, what's next? Where can people go to find you and find out more about the work and everything you're doing now?
Right now, it's just the podcast, man. We're just getting back into full-time podcaster chair. So we have 2 podcasts now. We'd love for anybody to go check those out, give us some feedback, what we could be doing better. We have Travis Makes Money, which is our daily business entrepreneurship show. And we have Travis Makes Friends, which is like broader society culture, talk to comedians, psychologists, athletes, UFC champs, stuff stuff like that over there. So actually Tim Kennedy's coming on that one.
Dude, that's awesome.
He already came on. We're releasing that episode here in the next few weeks on Travis Makes Friends. So that one's more like longer form, agendaless conversations that just kind of go all over the place.
Yeah.
And then Travis Makes Money is like daily entrepreneur interviews.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man. You're doing those daily, like releasing those daily?
7 days a week, man. Yep.
Dude, that's wild. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, man. You guys heard it there. Go check out Travis and everything he's got going on. Travis, dude, truly an honor, man, having you on. Really appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me, G. It was a pleasure.
1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9 the thought of being emotionless started taking over my mind.